I work as a correctional officer in Stagview Prison. Now, saying that probably brings up all sorts of images and ideas, but just know, the job is very different than what you see on TV. There are no nightly escape attempts, no big throwdowns in the yard every afternoon, and if your inmates are drunk, it's usually because they've been smuggling things out of the kitchen for weeks. The night shift is not generally very exciting, but it does have its quirks. For example, all the guards in confinement knew about the mysterious shower in Quad 2. At first, it was just a curiosity to help pass the time, a mystery to be solved, or some bit of annoyance that inmates could complain about ceaselessly. No one could have known how bad it would get in the end. I've been an officer in confinement probably since I got certified. There's a real need for male staff at an all-male facility. Shocking, I know, and the confinement unit is no different. Typically, the crew is small, each filling a desired need. My temperament was thought to be beneficial in a unit generally occupied by hard asses, and so I was assigned to the unit to fill that role. In the 2 years I've been here, I've seen and heard some things that you don't usually see on TV. I've heard hits planned out through the back grates and the windows. I've had all manner of things thrown at me through the flaps, which we push their food or their clothes in through. I've been called some pretty colorful names. I've stumbled across my fair share of bodies, too, hanging or bleeding, which needed immediate medical attention. Shower 5, though, was definitely the weirdest thing I've ever seen. I couldn't begin to tell you why. I doubt anyone could, but sometimes when you put an inmate in Shower 5, they would reappear in Shower 3. For those unfamiliar with how prison quads are set up, let me explain. Each quad holds 28 cells, 14 on the top and 14 on the bottom, accessible by catwalk. There are 5 showers in each quad. Shower 1 and Shower 5 are on either side of the cells 1 and 14. Shower 2 and 4 are on either side of cell 15 and 28. And Shower 3 sits between cell 21 and 22. We shower 2 quads a night, which roughly takes about 3 to 4 hours, and makes up the biggest part of our night. Quad 2's shower night was Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Inmates are cuffed, removed from cells, weighed, given haircuts, and placed in the shower so we can search their cells. They're given roughly 15 minutes to wash and dry off before we come back, cuff them, and return them to their cells. While they're showering, they're locked in a shower cell about the size of, well, a household shower, while we go to the next quad and do pretty much the same thing. Sometimes within that 15-minute window, though, the inmate will close their eyes, to blink or maybe rinse their hair, and suddenly appear in Shower 3. At first, it would happen anywhere from 2 to 4 times a month. It was never anything you could count on. We'd sometimes take bets on when it would happen, too. It never happened in reverse, either. Shower 3 was broken, so we never used it. But when we put an inmate in Shower 3 for holding, he never went anywhere until we were ready for him to go somewhere. The shower was a mystery that provided a much-needed break from a tedious job. For the first 4 months, we laughed at the look of confusion on the inmates' faces who appeared in Shower 3, heads full of shampoo or frantically searching for a towel that wasn't there. It was a fun game, until Inmate Ferris disappeared. Inmate Ferris was one of the few who didn't request Shower 5 every shower night. The other inmates fought like cats to get that stall, and I'd come into the quad many nights to the sound of them bickering about who would get it tonight or trying to trade their breakfast trays for someone's spot in the line. One inmate, in particular, Inmate Garvey, used to sell his breakfast tray for their place in the line if it would get him into Shower 5. He showered there 9 nights out of 10, and still never had it happen to him. One night in particular, we had just packed him away and put the next man in Shower 5, only to return to find Shower 3 occupied, Shower 5 empty, and Inmate Garvey pouting like an angry child. They all tried, but, in truth, less than half of them ever got to experience it. And none of them got to experience it like Inmate Ferris did. When it came time for Ferris to go, he said he wasn't going to go to Shower 5. Usually this wouldn't have been a problem. There were always tons of others willing to go in his place. But tonight, Ferris was my last shower. Garvey immediately started hooting about wanting to take his place, but we ignored him. On that night, all I was thinking about was the food waiting for me in the fridge and the prospect of being done with another shower night. There was also the matter of Ferris's smell. Ferris had been refusing his shower for the last 7 shower nights. The other shift didn't quite enforce the rules like we did about bathing once a week, and the administration had begun to notice Ferris's odor. They had sent down the order after their latest inspection that Ferris would shower tonight, on his own, or with assistance. Look, Ferris, you're going in that shower. It's the only one I have available, and you're my last shower. I ain't going in that shower. He said it evenly as he stared at me through the glass door. Purvis started walking towards us, but I waved him off, not wanting to spook Ferris and create a situation where there didn't need to be one. Look, Ferris, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. If you refuse this shower, I can get a bunch of angry men to come down here and pull you out and put you in the shower. Or you could be an adult and go take your shower, and we can be done with this. What's it gonna be? He argued a bit more, but in the end, he put on the cuffs and went to shower 5 meekly enough. I always kind of regret making him go. He was praying when I closed the shower door. He was very religious, and a shower that made people vanish was something he neither trusted nor understood. I closed him in and took off his cuffs. At first, I didn't think he was going to shower at all. As I descended the stairs, though, I heard the water start and decided to make a trip to the officer station for a quick bite. The crisis had been averted, and now it was time for a well-deserved reward. 15 minutes later, I returned to find 3 occupied showers and 2 empty showers. Well, not exactly empty. Ferris's towel was still hanging off the door, and his soap dish was still sitting on the ledge. Of Inmate Ferris, though, there was no sign. Purvis looked around, not quite understanding what had happened, and wondered out loud if we'd filled all the showers before we left. I said we had, and Purvis and I spent the next hour searching every shower, every cell on the quad, and every cell and shower in every other quad for good measure. We checked the CCTV in the station, but there was no video of him leaving the shower. The video showed him showering 1 minute and gone the next. The strange shower hadn't disappeared Ferris to a different shower this time. It had simply disappeared him. The next 3 days were a nightmare. Ferris's disappearance prompted emergency search of all dorms, a compound-wide lockdown, the dispatching of the K-9 team, and a county-wide manhunt that extended into neighboring counties before it was finally called off after a fruitless 2 weeks. For 3 days, we were questioned, had to make multiple written and verbal statements, and were grilled endlessly by the local and federal officers. The cameras clearly showed that we had been absent from the quad when Ferris had disappeared, so after 3 days, they had no choice but to let us return to work. We weren't sure what to make of the incident, but we chalked it up as the strangeness of Shower 5 and went back to work as usual. We didn't use Shower 5 anymore, though. It seemed like the strange magic had finally turned sour. We even called in a favor and had maintenance come down to fix Shower 3, which meant we still had 4 showers in Quad 2. We didn't see Ferris for another 3 months. I've said we a lot in this story, but I haven't really talked about the men I served with in confinement. Purvis was our muscle, 6 feet tall and built like a barrel. I'm pretty sure all the inmates thought he communicated through grunts and the occasional go to hell. If you weren't an inmate, though, he was one of the nicest guys you'd ever care to know. I've spent many afternoons on his back porch with a beer in my hand and the smell of steaks on the grill, chatting with the third member of our trio, McCann, while Purvis grilled. McCann, Sergeant McCann that was a 10-year vet who'd spent most of his time doing paperwork and fielding questions from the brass. He let us handle most of the day-to-day drudgery while he insulated us in a warm blanket of correctly managed reports and accurately maintained logs. McCann was far from what you'd call imposing, standing about 5'2" with thick glasses and a slim frame, but he was knowledgeable about his job and always had something to talk about. He was the last sergeant I ever served with in that confinement unit. 3 months passed and Ferris's disappearance was starting to fade. After the inquiry and the inquest determining whether or not we'd had something to do with the disappearance, they put us back in confinement and told us to keep a closer watch in the future. We talked about it sometimes, speculating on what had happened to him, but ultimately we lost interest after the paperwork ended and the hype died down. He was gone, and we still had a job to do. The showers went on, days turned into weeks. It was Sunday when Ferris finally came back. Sundays were pretty easy in confinement. We didn't do showers on Sunday night. The night was spent cleaning and passing out toiletries and generally just finding something online to watch so we could run out the clock. We brought food in to share most Sundays, and this one was no exception. I brought chicken, Purvis brought soda, and McCann brought a pecan pie his sister had made. By 9 o'clock, we had caught up on our paperwork, passed out our toiletries, and we were full as ticks and ready to find a movie. I had my feet kicked up on the desk and was just getting ready to enjoy a nap when the sound of boots on doors started in Quad 2. McCann looked up from the screen and sighed. I knew it was too good to be true. We headed out into the quad to see what all the kicking was about. As Purvis and I came to the door, we were buffeted by the screams of, "Shower 3!" and "It's Purvis! He's dying!" We came up the stairs 2 at a time, and what I saw will haunt me until the day I die. I'd seen men get hurt in the line of work, I'd seen men get stabbed, and I'd watched a few men die, but I had never seen anything to top this level of cruelty. It was Ferris, all right. We'd arrived in time to see his last few breaths and listen to him wheeze as his lungs finished filling with blood. He lay on the dirty shower floor, his blood pooling as it tried to flow into the drain, and shuddered out his last seconds of life. He was naked, and we were saved having to look at his mutilated genitalia because of the fetal position he'd taken. A nurse would later tell us that he had been cut and sliced cruelly before he died, and his stomach and intestines were a mess of punctured tissue. We didn't know about this until later, but what we could see was horrific enough. His skin had been sliced by long claws, and his back looked as though someone had tried to peel him a strip at a time. His arms, legs, neck, face, and especially his back were in bloody tatters, and when he finally died, I considered it a mercy. "Go get the Sarge," Purvis said, and as a man with the shortest time in, I was relegated to the bubble while McCann went to the floor to assess the situation. They took Ferris out under a sheet, and it was dripping red in its wake. This started a whole new bombardment of paperwork. CCTV footage was combed over a frame at a time, witness statements were taken, and dispositions were written. Luckily, we had done our rounds on time. One of us was on camera not even 30 minutes before he'd appeared in the shower. It was agreed that the incident had been no negligence of ours. The narrative they constructed was an unsatisfying one, but it kept our bacon out of the fire, so we didn't argue. Ferris had managed to worm his way into the grates through the showers and had made it to the ventilation system. The other inmates had likely been feeding him and telling him when to stop moving. This was before audio was normal in the dorms, so we couldn't check to see if they were talking to him. After 3 months, he'd gotten bored and wandered into one of the big fans and gotten cut up. He drug himself back into the shower 3 this time, and called for help. That's where we had found him. No inmates admitted to having talked to Ferris since he disappeared, and no blood was ever found in the vents. But this was a much better narrative than a shower that kept sending inmates from one shower to another. Sometimes, administration just wants paperwork to look good. Making sense was secondary. After that, no inmate would go near Shower 5. It spread the compound seemingly overnight, and any inmate that came into Quad 2 would refuse to go into that shower. We were more than happy to oblige this request. One more weird occurrence and they'd pull us all out and separate us between the other dorms. We all liked being where we were, and we were in no hurry to get sent somewhere else. For the next few months, we kept a low profile and tried our best to keep the disturbances to a minimum. If we needed a reminder of the incident, all we had to do was look at the red stains on the floor of Shower 3, the ones that no amount of scrubbing could get rid of. We managed to keep the weirdness to a minimum for about a month, before it came completely off the rails. Purvis and I were conducting showers in 3 and 4 when they brought in our latest wild child. Everett was what we'd call a frequent flyer. Had we known he was coming in, we'd have put him in the cell we'd just released him from 3 days ago. He'd gotten into another fight, probably over gang politics, and now he was sitting in the sally port again, cussing up a storm. When they asked us where we wanted him, we didn't even think about Shower 5. We told them to just put him in a shower on the other side and we'd deal with him later. I don't know if he said something to them or not, but they later told us that they loaded him into Shower 5, leaving the cuffs on because he was being combative. We finished showers later that night. Just about the time my butt hit the chair, I remembered Everett. I haven't heard a peep out of him. Did they load him into a cell? McCann looked at his board and shook his head. Pretty sure they put him in a shower. A quick look through the glass told us that he wasn't in one of the ground floor showers. How could he be? We had used all the bottom showers to shower other quads. When I asked them why they had put him in Shower 5, they answered that it had been funny to watch him piss his pants in fear of the mystery shower. It was less funny after the events of that night. We were preparing to go put him away when a chorus of screams brought our attention to the quad. Inmates were screaming, terrified wails that only the doomed are capable of, and the whole quad was going nuts. We could all see the door to Shower 5 heaving and buckling as something slammed into it with a machine-like rhythm. That wasn't like any kicking I'd ever heard, and added to the screaming, it put me on edge. Shower 5 had become something sinister, something not altogether understandable, and I did not want to see what new horror it had in store for us. I started to move, despite my apprehension, but McCann stopped me. "I've got this. Call the captain and get some help down here while we see what's going on." His action saved my life that day. Sometimes I wish it hadn't. He and Purvis left the station in a hurry, piling up at the door as they hunted for keys. They came through the door, one behind the other, as they mounted the steps in a flurry of motion. They were at the top of the stairs and heading towards the shower when the door buckled outward. That door was reinforced metal, and whatever was on the other side had separated it from the hinges. The hinge hung lamely, concrete still clinging to it, as something dark and groping tried to climb through the hole. The snapping mouth glistened in the overhead lights as the creature scrambled and pushed to be free of the prison. I saw Purvis take a step back, bumping into McCann as the two tried to process what was happening. All thoughts of calling for help had fled me as I watched the events unfold. The creature freed itself from the hole, black goo glistening on the torn door, and made its way up the wall with a hellish shriek and a metallic clitter I could hear through the glass. The whole quad had started to scream, and their hellish chorus was only drowned out by the creature's scream of pain as it left its glistening trail behind it on the concrete wall. The two officers, my friends, stood like statues as the thing swung its eyeless head from side to side. It seemed to be confused by all the screaming, the sound bouncing off the concrete, and I thought they might escape as Purvis took another tentative step backward. That's when McCann started screaming. I'd seen McCann face the most hardened of inmates, seen him hold the line during the last summer's riots as we held the gate against a dozen screaming inmates. But this creature was too much for him. He screamed, and it cut across the hellish sound of the quad like a knife through butter. The creature then turned its eyeless face towards him, and the front of its bulbous mouth split open to reveal lines of serrated teeth. It loosed a high-pitched sound like a piece of farm equipment stripping its gears, and leapt, coming stickily off the wall. Its path took it straight into Purvis, who was frozen in front of the screaming sergeant. It rode him to the ground, knocking McCann off his feet, and the strange mouth ripped itself open to reveal rows of glistening black teeth. Its mouth dove, and it tore chunks of flesh out of the screaming man as McCann scooted backwards in a state of sheer terror. He reached for his gas, the small can of chemical spray that is usually our best defense against aggressive inmates, but his hand seemed unsure how to break the seal that held it in the holster, or even whether or not he wanted to. The creature, meanwhile, was wolfing down gobbets of the quickly exsanguinating Purvis. Purvis was not a small man. I had seen him lay hands on men who would have given me trouble, and put them on their faces as easily as someone subduing a child. Purvis was straining against the thing as it tore bloody strips out of his shirt, his undershirt, and his chest, but his biceps were losing purchase, and he was starting to weaken. The creature raised its muzzle all at once and bit down on his face, engulfing the man's head in a single bite. As Purvis kicked and thrashed under it, I saw McCann get to his feet and run for it. The catwalk had 2 points of egress, and McCann seemed to think that if he could get to the other side, he could elude the creature and put the solid steel door between them. He almost did it, too, until the creature looked up from the stripped skull it was chewing on and heard him running down the stairs. It leapt, frog-like, and hit one of the overhead caged lights as it swung drunkenly before falling to the concrete with a shower of glass and twisted bars. As it fell, the creature leaped off it and caught McCann in the back as he ran for the door. The door is framed with 2 large glass windows that stand about 25 feet high, so you can glance out at the quad and see what's happening at any given time. The creature slammed into McCann and plastered him against one of these windows like a bug. His nose broke, his glasses shattered, and as he slid down, I could follow his progress with the trail of blood he left. The only thing visible was one hand, spasmodically grasping at the impenetrable barrier between him and his freedom as the creature devoured him. I didn't know what to do. I just stood there with the phone in one hand, dial tone blaring at me, and the radio in the other hand, putting out the same good-natured chatter as it usually does this time of night. It was So weird to think there were people having normal nights somewhere else on the compound. While my two best friends were being devoured before my eyes, there were actually people out there having comfortable nights filled with nothing more pressing than a bellyache or an unruly inmate who wouldn't go to bed. It didn't even seem possible that our universe could be in the same plane of existence. I think that's when my mind snapped. Or maybe it was when I looked up from the radio and saw the creature looking at me, its eyeless face staring straight at me, that my mind simply unraveled. I let the phone slip out of my hand, let the radio clatter to the desk, and I simply curled in a ball on the floor. I don't know how long I was there, but when I came back to myself, the captain was shaking me, and all hell had truly broken loose. They had come in after I didn't answer the radio. They had used the emergency keys to come into the station and found me on the ground in a catatonic state. They had looked out to see the blood splattered on the windows and feared that a riot was underway. They had assembled their response team, a 7-man team with riot gear, and proceeded into the quad. As I looked out into the shadowy hellscape, I could see that several of the cells had been opened somehow, and there was a lot more blood on the floor than I remembered. The remains of body armor and broken shotguns lay everywhere, and the lights in the quad seemed to be in a constant state of flicker. The team had gone in and been attacked by what they thought was a mountain lion. They had been ripped to shreds in a matter of minutes. Only the team leader had managed to escape after throwing a flash grenade in the thing's face. It had batted the door a little while trying to get at him, but had eventually gone back to eating the remains of the 6 other members. The team leader said it looked like some of the inmates had been killed, though he couldn't figure out how it had been getting into the cells. They looked to me for answers, but I had none. The team leader joined me in a fetal ball in the corner, while the captain made calls for backup. I sat in that station for the next 2 days, nodding off when sleep finally took me, and watching as the state police and animal control tried to figure out how to get this thing out of the quad. After the 3rd police officer was ripped to shreds, we got a visit from someone higher up. The warden came into the station, looking nonplussed and calm as ever. He had a sit-down with the captain and the chief of the state police, who had made my station his command center. He told us that the quad was to be quarantined until further notice, the reflection on his glasses making him look as inhuman as the creature. No one was to go in or out until this thing was dead. Captain asked him what we should do about the men trapped inside, men who hadn't eaten in 2 days, and he simply shrugged and said if they were in there, then they were as good as dead already. That thing isn't going to let anyone out once it's in there, and a rescue attempt isn't going to do anything but lose you more men. Don't worry, though. We'll make it so no one who's gone through the door ever existed. The warden led the chief out after that, and all the state police went with him. It was just us in our own little world again after that. He was true to his word, too. McCann and Purvis were unmarried bachelors, so they just disappeared one day after work. Of the 27 inmates who'd been in that quad, I don't know. Their files were gone when I came back. Their DC numbers and CDC records expunged, and all the cells were open and empty. The doors to Quad 2 have been sealed shut, the doors welded closed, and caution tape has been draped across it. I was offered McCann's position as confinement sergeant, and I took it. I didn't take it because I wanted it, but because I felt like it was my sacred trust to guard against that thing every night. I've never seen it during the day. It doesn't seem to like the light, but at night you can catch glimpses of it in the darkness as it stalks the rats and roaches that still live out in the quad. The new officers they put back here always ask me what happened in Quad 2, but I never tell them the whole story. If they knew, they might try to get in and get its attention, adding more blood to my hands. I've seen officers come and go in the last 10 years, but I haven't told anyone about the incident. My captain's a major now at another facility. Everyone from my old shift has either quit or moved on. I alone keep my vigil here every night. Sometimes I see him in the semi-darkness, looking at me, thinking. After 10 years, I imagine he's hungry for something more than rats. Maybe in another 10, he'll question how thick that glass is between him and the real meat. When he does, I'll be here. Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thank you so much for joining me for tonight's story. What a treat I have for you guys. 2 Stragview stories in 1 week. I'd better be careful or I might start to spoil you guys. If you enjoy Stragview stories half as much as I do, I highly recommend that you head to Amazon and get a copy for yourself. Tonight's story is from Stragview Stories, as well as being from the second book in our compilation. If you would enjoy more Tales of Prison Horror, then come on down to Amazon and get your own copy. Let's go ahead and thank our patrons before we head out. Thanks to Leslie Lou Riddle and Janet for being our Spooky Skeleton tier contributors, and thanks to Glenn Jenkins for being our Ghost Rider tier contributors. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate what you give to this show, and I just couldn't do it without you. If you too would like to support the show, come on down to Patreon. For just $5 a month, you too can join our Spooky Skeleton tier army, and have your name read out at the end of every TikTok and every YouTube video that I make. As some of you have noticed, we finally got to 1,000 subs, so I'm hoping that the algorithm gods notice my offerings, and maybe soon we'll see a few new faces around here. If you guys would like to join my Discord, I'd be glad to have you. We're fairly active, but I'm sure with a few more members we could really get some things going. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.